My name is Rebecca Martinez, and at 29 years old, I thought I understood what family meant. For the past 6 years, I had dedicated my entire life to caring for my mother, after her stroke left her partially paralyzed and struggling with speech. I gave up my marketing career, moved back into my childhood home, and became her full-time caregiver. What I discovered when she finally recovered would shatter everything I believed about love, sacrifice, and family. If you have ever felt unappreciated by those you love most, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe. I am about to share how I learned that sometimes the people we sacrifice everything for see our devotion as nothing more than obligation. Growing up as the middle child between my older sister Amanda and younger brother Carlos, I always felt like the responsible one. While Amanda was the golden child with her perfect grades and later her successful law career, and Carlos was the baby who could do no wrong despite his constant scrapes and mistakes, I was dependable Rebecca. The one who helped with homework, mediated sibling fights, and made sure everyone got where they needed to be on time. My parents, Maria and Roberto Martinez, ran a small family restaurant called Casa Martinez. Dad handled the business side while Mom was the heart of the kitchen, creating authentic Mexican dishes that had customers driving from 3 cities away. They worked long hours, often 6 days a week, which meant I naturally fell into the role of looking after my siblings. When I was 12 and Carlos was 8, he broke his arm falling from a tree in our backyard. While Mom and Dad were at the restaurant, I was the one who walked him to the emergency room, filled out the paperwork using information I had memorized, and sat with him through the entire ordeal. The nurses were amazed by my composure and organization. "That is just Rebecca," my family would say. "She handles everything." This pattern continued through high school. When Amanda needed help studying for the SATs, I created detailed study schedules and flashcards. When Carlos got suspended for fighting, I was the one who convinced the principal to reduce his punishment and helped him write his apology letter. My parents were grateful, but in the way people are grateful for electricity or running water, essential but easily taken for granted. I excelled in school myself, graduating with honors and earning a scholarship to study marketing at the University of Texas. For 4 years, I experienced what it was like to live for myself. I joined clubs, dated, made friends who chose to spend time with me rather than needing something from me. After graduation, I landed a promising position at a digital marketing agency in Austin, working with exciting clients and building campaigns that reached millions of people. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was becoming who I was, meant to be rather than just who my family needed me to be. I dated a wonderful man named David, a graphic designer who appreciated my ambition and supported my goals. We talked about marriage, about traveling together, about building our own lives while staying connected to, but not consumed by our families. Everything changed on a Tuesday morning in March when I was 23. I was in a client meeting presenting a social media strategy for a major retailer when my phone rang, then rang again. On the third call, I excused myself to answer. "Rebecca," Amanda's voice was shaking. "You need to come home now. Something happened to Mom." The drive from Austin to San Antonio had never felt longer. My hands gripped the steering wheel as I tried to process what little information Amanda had given me. Mom had collapsed at the restaurant during lunch prep. Dad had found her on the kitchen floor, conscious but unable to speak clearly. She was at Methodist Hospital, and the doctors were running tests. When I arrived at the hospital, the sight of my family in the waiting room hit me like a physical blow. Dad sat hunched forward, his strong hands trembling as he clutched a cup of coffee. Carlos paced near the windows, his usual confident swagger replaced by anxious energy. Amanda sat rigidly in a chair, her lawyer composure barely containing her fear. The doctor, Dr. Patel, explained that Mom had suffered a stroke. While she was stable, there was significant damage to the left side of her brain, affecting her speech and motor functions. Her right side was partially paralyzed, and her ability to communicate was severely compromised. Recovery would be a long process, requiring extensive rehabilitation, and there were no guarantees about how much function she would regain. The weeks that followed blurred together in a haze of hospital visits, insurance paperwork, and difficult decisions. Amanda flew in from Chicago, where she worked for a prestigious firm, but could only stay a week before returning to an important case. Carlos, who was finishing his senior year of college, was present but seemed overwhelmed by the reality of Mom's condition. Dad tried to maintain the restaurant while spending every possible moment at Mom's bedside, but the strain was showing. He aged years in a matter of weeks, his hair going completely gray and deep lines etching themselves around his eyes. The restaurant, which had been our family's livelihood for over 20 years, began struggling without Mom's expertise and Dad's divided attention. It became clear that someone needed to coordinate Mom's care, manage her therapy appointments, handle the insurance claims, and help Dad keep the family business afloat. Amanda's career was at a crucial juncture. She was up for partner at her firm. Carlos was about to graduate and had interviews lined up for entry-level positions. And then there was me, with my promising but still developing career, my relationship. With David, my independence. I made the choice that felt inevitable, though it broke my heart. I gave notice at the marketing agency, explaining the family emergency. My boss was understanding but disappointed. I had been in line for a promotion that would have doubled my salary and expanded my responsibilities significantly. David was supportive initially, promising that our relationship could weather anything. Moving back into my childhood bedroom felt like stepping backward in time. The walls still held posters from high school, and my single bed seemed impossibly small after years of adult independence. But Mom needed round-the-clock care, and the alternative was a nursing facility that none of us could afford, and that felt like giving up on her recovery. The first months were the hardest. Mom's speech was limited to single words, often slurred and difficult to understand. Her right arm hung uselessly at her side, and she needed assistance with basic tasks like eating, bathing, and getting dressed. Physical therapy appointments consumed 3 days a week, speech therapy another 2. Between sessions, I worked with her at home, following the exercises the therapist prescribed. Dad gradually resumed his role at the restaurant, but evenings found him exhausted and heartbroken, watching his wife of 30 years struggle to form simple sentences. I took over all of Mom's medical appointments, insurance coordination, and medication management. The paperwork alone was overwhelming. Prior authorizations, therapy schedules, specialist referrals, equipment rentals. Amanda called frequently from Chicago, offering moral support and occasionally flying in for a weekend. During these visits, she would express amazement at how well I was handling everything and guilt about not being able to help more. But she also made it clear that leaving her career was not an option. I am finally making real progress toward partner, she would explain. Mom would want me to succeed. Carlos visited more regularly since he lived closer after graduating and finding work in San Antonio. But his visits were brief and seemed to focus more on avoiding the difficult realities of Mom's condition than actually helping with her care. He would play music for her or show her funny videos on his phone, bringing moments of joy but leaving the daily grind of caregiving entirely to me. My relationship with David strained under the pressure. He visited when he could, but the reality of my situation was harder than either of us had anticipated. Our conversations became dominated by Mom's progress or setbacks, insurance frustrations, and my exhaustion. The vibrant, ambitious woman he had fallen in love with was being consumed by the demands of caregiving. After 8 months, David sat me down for a conversation I had been dreading. "Rebecca, I love you," he said gently, "but this is not what I signed up for. You have completely disappeared into your family's needs, and I do not know when or if you will ever come back." The breakup was devastating but not unexpected. Part of me knew that asking someone to wait indefinitely while I rebuilt my mother was unfair. But it also felt like another piece of my former life being sacrificed on the altar of family obligation. As months turned to years, Mom showed gradual improvement. Her speech became clearer, though still limited. She regained some movement in her right arm and could walk short distances with a walker. Small victories that felt monumental after the devastation of the initial stroke. But progress was slow, and setbacks were frequent. A urinary tract infection would affect her cognitive function for weeks. A fall in the bathroom despite my vigilance would require an emergency room visit and adjustment of her medications. Each crisis reinforced how essential my presence had become to her daily functioning. I watched my former colleagues advance their careers through LinkedIn updates and Christmas cards. Friends got married, bought homes, traveled to exotic locations, and built the lives I had once imagined for myself. My world had contracted to the boundaries of my childhood home, medical facilities, and the grocery store where I shopped for special foods that were easier for Mom to swallow. The isolation was perhaps the hardest part. Caregiving is an all-consuming responsibility that leaves little time or energy for maintaining friendships. People stopped inviting me to things when I consistently had to decline or leave early. Well-meaning friends would suggest that I hire help or look into respite care, not understanding that our finances were already stretched thin with medical expenses not covered by insurance. Dad did his best to support me emotionally, but he was dealing with his own grief over the loss of the vibrant woman he had married. He would often work late at the restaurant, I suspect partly to avoid confronting the daily reality of Mom's limitations. When he was home, he tried to help, but 40 years of marriage had established patterns where Mom handled certain household tasks, and he seemed lost without her full partnership. By my 4th year of caregiving, I had developed what Dr. Martinez, my own physician, recognized as caregiver burnout. I was experiencing chronic fatigue, anxiety, and depression. My physical health was suffering from years of disrupted sleep, poor nutrition, and lack of exercise. I had gained 30 pounds and developed high blood pressure at the age of 27. Dr. Martinez strongly recommended that I consider outside help or alternative care arrangements. "Your mother needs care," she told me during an appointment I finally made for myself. "But she also needs you to be healthy enough to provide it. You cannot pour from an empty cup." When I broached the subject of hiring part-time help with Dad, his response was immediate and distressing. "We cannot afford that, Rebecca. Besides, no one will care for her the way you do. She is comfortable with you. Change would upset her progress." The guilt was overwhelming. How could I put a price on my mother's comfort and recovery? How could I risk setbacks in her progress for my own well-being? Yet I felt myself disappearing more completely with each passing month. Amanda's visits became less frequent as her career demands increased. She made partner at her firm, an achievement she had worked toward for over a decade. During one of her brief visits home, she pulled me aside for a conversation that stung more than she probably intended. "Rebecca, you are amazing for doing all this," she said. "I could never sacrifice my career the way you have. You are so much better at this caregiving stuff than I would be. You have always been the nurturing one." The implication was clear. This was my role, my strength, my responsibility. Not a temporary situation we were all navigating together, but my destiny as the family caretaker. Amanda returned to Chicago with relief, knowing that Mom was in capable hands. My hands. Carlos's attitude was similar, though less explicitly stated. During his weekly visits, he would express gratitude for everything I was doing while making it clear that his job, his social life, and his plans for the future took precedence over caregiving responsibilities. He was building his career in software development and dating a lovely woman named Sophia. His life was moving forward while mine remained frozen in place. The 5th year brought more significant improvements in Mom's condition. Her speech became clearer and more complex. She could walk longer distances and had regained more use of her right arm. The progress we had all hoped for was finally becoming reality, but by then I had lost sight of what my life might look like beyond her recovery. I had not worked in my field for 5 years. Marketing, especially digital marketing, evolved rapidly, and my skills were outdated. My savings had been depleted years earlier. I had no romantic relationships, few friendships, and no hobbies or interests beyond Mom's care schedule. At 28, I felt like I was starting from nothing, but with none of the optimism and possibility that had characterized my early 20s. The turning point came during Mom's 6th year of recovery. Her speech pathologist, Mrs. Rodriguez, whom we had worked with for years, made an observation that would change everything. "Rebecca," she said after one of Mom's sessions, "I have been doing this for 20 years, and I have never seen anyone work as hard or as consistently as you have with your mother. But I need to ask you something difficult. When was the last time you did something just for yourself?" The question left me speechless. I could not remember the last movie I had seen for pleasure, the last book I had read that was not about stroke recovery, the last conversation I had that did not center around medical appointments or therapy goals. My entire identity had become subsumed into being Mom's caregiver. Mrs. Rodriguez continued gently. Your mother has made remarkable progress, and much of that is due to your dedication. But she has also become very dependent on you for things she might be able to do herself now. Sometimes loving someone means encouraging their independence, not just providing for their comfort. That conversation planted a seed that grew over the following weeks. I began to notice how Mom would wait for me to bring her water rather than asking for help getting it herself. How she deferred to me for decisions she was capable of making. How my presence, once essential for her survival, might now be limiting her continued growth toward independence. The revelation that changed everything came on a Thursday morning in October. Mom had been having an exceptionally good week. Her speech was clear, her mobility strong, and her mood positive. She had just finished a phone conversation with her sister, laughing and chatting for nearly an hour. I was in the kitchen preparing her medications when I overheard her talking to our neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who had stopped by with homemade soup. "Oh, Maria," Mrs. Chen was saying, "you look wonderful. How are you feeling?" Mom's response froze me in place. "I am doing much better, but I am worried about Rebecca. She has given up everything for me, and now I do not know how to tell her I do not need all this help anymore. She has made this her whole life, and I am afraid she will not know what to do if I get better." Mrs. Chen made sympathetic noises. "It must be hard for both of you." "It is." Mom's voice was clearer than I had heard it in years. She was so successful before, and now she has nothing of her own. But how do I tell my daughter, who has sacrificed everything, that I want to try living more independently? She will think I am ungrateful. I stood frozen in the kitchen, medication bottles forgotten in my hands. My mother, whom I had devoted 6 years of my life to helping, was worried about hurting my feelings by getting better. The person I had sacrificed everything for saw my devotion not as love, but as a burden we both carried. The conversation continued, but I stopped listening. Instead, I was processing years of interactions through this new lens. How many times had Mom seemed frustrated when I anticipated her needs before she expressed them? How often had she started to do something independently before I stepped in to help? Had my care become a cage that limited her recovery rather than supporting it? That evening, after Mrs. Chen left and Dad came home from the restaurant, I suggested we have a family meeting. Mom looked apprehensive, as if she suspected I might have overheard her conversation. Dad settled into his chair with the weariness of someone who had grown accustomed to crisis management. "I have something I need to say," I began carefully. "Mom, you have made incredible progress in your recovery, much more than the doctors initially thought possible." She smiled but remained guarded. "I think it might be time for me to start rebuilding my own life," I continued. "Not because I do not want to help you, but because I think you are ready to be more independent than our current arrangement allows." The relief that washed over Mom's face was unmistakable, followed immediately by guilt. "Rebecca, honey," she said, "I do not want you to think I am not grateful. You saved my life. Without you, I never would have recovered this much. I know, Mom. And I am grateful I could be here when you needed me. But I think we both need to start imagining what comes next." Dad looked between us, clearly struggling to follow the emotional undercurrents. "What exactly are you suggesting?" he asked. "I have been thinking about going back to school," I said. "Maybe getting a master's degree in healthcare, administration, or nonprofit management. Something that builds on the experience I have gained but opens up new possibilities." The conversation that followed was difficult but necessary. We discussed Mom's current capabilities honestly, identifying areas where she could safely take on more responsibility. We talked about hiring a part-time aide to help with tasks that were still challenging while giving her space to grow. Most importantly, we acknowledged that the crisis phase of her recovery was over, and it was time for all of us to start rebuilding, rather than just surviving. Over the following weeks, Mom began demonstrating independence in ways that surprised all of us. With less hovering from me, she pushed herself to walk farther, to prepare simple meals, to manage more of her own daily routines. The confidence that grew from these small victories propelled her toward bigger challenges. I researched graduate programs and found one in healthcare administration that specifically focused on patient advocacy and family support systems. My years of navigating insurance systems, coordinating medical care, and understanding the patient perspective had given me expertise I had not recognized. What felt like a detour from my career path might actually be preparation for something more meaningful. The application process was daunting after years away from academic work, but Mom became my biggest cheerleader. She helped me practice for interviews, proofread my personal statement, and even offered to pay for application fees from money she had saved from her disability payments. "Your essay about family caregiving made me cry," she told me after reading. "My personal statement. You have learned so much from taking care of me. Now you can help other families who are going through what we went through." 8 months later, I received my acceptance letter to the master's program. The 2-year program would allow me to continue living at home while gradually transitioning Mom toward full independence. By the time I graduated, she would be ready to live with minimal assistance, and I would have a degree that opened doors to meaningful work in healthcare advocacy. The first day of classes felt surreal after years of medical appointments and therapy sessions. Sitting in a lecture hall, taking notes on healthcare policy and organizational behavior, I felt parts of myself awakening that had been dormant for years. My classmates were impressed by my firsthand knowledge of patient care challenges, and professors valued the real-world experience I brought to theoretical discussions. Mom's progress continued to exceed everyone's expectations. By the end of my first year of graduate school, she was preparing simple meals, managing her own medications, and even helping Dad at the restaurant a few hours a week. Her speech was nearly normal, and she had regained enough mobility to live independently with only minimal assistance. Amanda visited for my graduation ceremony, and her reaction to Mom's transformation was striking. "I cannot believe how well she is doing," she told me privately. "You made this possible, Rebecca. Your sacrifice gave her the foundation she needed to rebuild her life." But I had learned something important during those years of study and gradual independence. It was not just sacrifice that had helped Mom recover, it was also knowing when to step back and allow her to reclaim her autonomy. Love sometimes means providing support, but it also means having the wisdom to withdraw that support when it begins to limit rather than enable growth. The job I accepted after graduation was with a nonprofit organization that provided resources and advocacy for families dealing with chronic illness and disability. My role involved developing educational programs, coordinating support groups, and advocating for policy changes that would improve patient and family experiences. It was work that felt meaningful because it grew directly from the challenges we had faced as a family. On my first day at the new job, Mom insisted on packing my lunch, just as she had when I was a child starting school. The symbolism was not lost on either of us. We were both beginning new chapters, both reclaiming parts of ourselves that had been set aside during the crisis years. The evening before I started work, we sat together on the back porch of our childhood home. Mom moved easily in her chair, her speech clear and animated as she told me about plans she was making to expand her role at the restaurant. I listened, marveling at the transformation from the frightened, dependent woman she had been 60 years earlier. "Rebecca," she said suddenly, "I need you to know something. These years when you took care of me, they were not wasted. You did not just help me recover. You became someone I am incredibly proud of." I felt tears welling up. Some days I felt like I lost myself completely. "You did not lose yourself," she corrected gently. "You found strength you did not know you had, and now you get to use that strength to help other people. That is not loss. That is transformation." As I reflect on those 6 years now, working in my dream career and watching Mom continue to thrive independently, I understand that we both learned important lessons about love, sacrifice, and the delicate balance between supporting someone and enabling their dependence. Have you ever found yourself giving so much to someone that you lost sight of your own needs? How did you find your way back to yourself? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is to step back and trust the people we care about to grow into their own strength. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, true love includes helping others become their best selves, even when that means your role in their life needs to change. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the wisdom to know when to hold on and when to let go.